me start welding. I feel like I'm delaying it. I feel like I'm chicken. Welcome back to another episode of No Bolts Left Behind. And today, we're back working on the 1955 Ford F100 pickup truck. The last episode, we swapped out the old axle and got disc brakes, limited slip. It's awesome, I love it. And today, we're gonna work on the front end. And this is gonna be a lot bigger of a project. I'm gonna completely remove all of the original 70-year-old technology and upgrade it to a mix of like 80s, 90s, and current technology. We're gonna have frickin' coilovers. It's gonna be awesome. Let me show you what I'm gonna do. So this is the original ancient front suspension, which I'm sure was just fine for a truck 70 years ago. In fact, I think my Suzuki Samurai had also front leaf springs, but I will say from experience, it's not the greatest riding suspension setup for the front. And so I'm gonna take all of this junk out. When I'm done here in just a few minutes, I'm gonna have absolutely nothing on the front end except for a couple of frame rails. I gotta take out the steering column, all of the steering stuff, front axle, wheels. It's all gonna be gone and it's gonna be replaced by something way, way cooler. I'll show you that in a minute, but first things first, let's get this entire thing stripped out. Okay, I've got this thing out of there. That was a lot of work. There were just so many of these little rivets that I pretty much just had to grind off with my grinder. I think maybe like 15 of them or something. I'm really, really happy that I have an air hammer because I don't think I would have been able to get these lower mounts, whatever, without that thing. Whew, okay, I'm glad it's off. It's quite the disaster area over here, but we're almost there. All right, frame is relatively clean, ready for some rust prevention paint. So on this truck, I'm gonna do the Mustang II swap. And here's the entire kit that's going to absolutely transform the handling on this truck. The improvement over the manual drum brake, leaf spring, solid axle is cannot be overstated. This is gonna be absolutely a night and day difference. And in fact, this kit should be more sophisticated than any of the cars I own, including my 1970 Challenger, which I race on a road course. This thing handles pretty well, but it has torsion bars and it has a steering box, not a rack and pinion. This bad boy, however, is gonna have coilovers, it's gonna have a power rack and pinion steering, it will have disc brakes, it's gonna be awesome. Let's go over this kit real quick. So coilover suspension means I'll be able to do adjustments on this bad boy. We got cross-drilled and slotted rotors for a disc brake upgrade. Got the calipers right there. We have our upper and lower control arms, tubular and very, very beefy. We got pretty large diameter tubing here, good stuff. And rack and pinion is, I think, probably the biggest part that's going to modernize the steering and the handling on this car. All that stuff's cool. That's pretty much like a high-end modern suspension setup. But here are the parts that are going to hook it up to the truck. This is the Crossmember that is going to bolt all of this stuff to the truck. It's built exactly for the specifications of this truck frame. We've also got the top upper control arm and coilover hats, whatever mounts. These guys are gonna go on top of the frame. This one will go obviously in between the frame. And then we have these plates here, which are frame reinforcement plates, which is probably a good idea because this is not like a full boxed frame. This is a C-channel frame. I'm sure it's strong in its own way. I'm sure it's special in its own way, but these plates are gonna make it a lot stronger and they're gonna help get this stuff really, really solidly mounted in there. Now, I'd like to give a shout out to Resto Mod Supply. They're a kind of like a hot rod shop out here in Southern California, out in Riverside. And they were the ones that hooked me up with all of this stuff. And I actually drove out there and checked out their shop. They sell hot rod parts, they sell Mustang II kits, and they also sell disc brake kits, like disc brake conversion kits. There are a couple things that set this guy apart. One of them is this built-in kind of like wider bracket here, which is meant to mount the wider control arm, which is what you need to eliminate your front strut rod. So oftentimes, I think almost all of the time with these kits, you have to actually like weld this stuff in yourself and gusset it. This comes already pre-set up, which is good. I'm doing coilover, so I need this bracket right here. And it's also a little extra braced, giving a little bit extra rigidity for the power steering rack. And just generally speaking, this is pretty chunky steel and definitely like well built, over engineered as I like. I'm pretty excited. This is going to be awesome. I do think it's kind of funny that my truck is going to have the most modernized, sophisticated suspension system of all of my cars, including my Corvette and my Challenger. Maybe I'll have to take it to the track one day. But yeah, let's get to it. Let's start getting this stuff installed. Okay, so the frame is pretty much prepped for the subframe. And one thing that I realized, or that I guess I didn't realize, I've known all along, but I know is very important, is finding the axle center line. And I did scribe that before taking off the wheels. I think I did a good job on this side, and I don't think I did a good job on that side because they're actually different. But you can measure from the leaf spring hole. That's how we're going to get this guy centered. This will be the wheel center right here. Let me first remove this powder coat, and then we'll jack this up into place, and we'll see how this thing's going to fit on there. Okay, so we're going to measure 19 3/4. Proud of myself on this side. Okay, only a 1/4 inch off over here. We just won't show the other side. Well, it's about the same amount off. It's just off in the other direction. So they're about a 1/2 inch off. So my car would have driven a
little to the right.
A little to the right. A lot to the right. Okay, we have the Crossmember sitting in place as close as I feel like my brain can do it. I'm no mathematician, but what is most important is just measuring the center line right here from where the leaf spring would have plugged in. We got that sitting at right at 19 3/4 on both sides. And then one thing I like to do is measure crossways, measuring the same points in an X, 38 3/4. And last but not least is the flatness of this. I do have these frame rails, depending on which part of the frame rail you hit, pretty close to 0. And same with this thing. We're going to hit it on 0 this first try. Oh, 0.1. Well, actually that matches. 0.1, 0.1.
There you go.
So this thing, come on, I really just want to see that. You know what I want. Ooh,
there it is.
0.0. You'll notice a little bit of a gap here. And that is because we have these boxing plates that are going to slide something like that. We're going to start welding. I feel like at this point, I feel like I'm delaying it. I feel like I'm chicken. Let's do it. Okay, I got the crossmember bolted in. bolted. I've got the crossmember welded in, and welded pretty seriously, I would say. Just a couple of shims on both sides to get this guy to be totally tight between the frame rails, which I think probably has to do with the distance that you push out your boxing plates, and then of course just variations in your frame. But I used about 1/8 inch shims, and it's all good. Everything is super duper solid. Welds are a little ugly as per usual. Gotta throw that in there because no matter how beautiful your welds are, somebody's gonna call you out for them being terrible. I've got the 2 shock tower, upper control arm mounting points tacked in, and I've got them set back from the center line about 1/2 inch. I was told that you want to set them back between 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch to give yourself a little bit of a camber. You want the tire not to be straight up and down, but to be a little bit, or I should say the angle of the tire to be a little bit like that. So this is the very last thing. I'm excited. Just got to burn these bad boys in there, and then we'll have Mustang suspension, Mustang II suspension. Oh, and you might notice that I did a little modification to this thing. I have like a lower 1 inch rectangular tube welded to kind of drop down this crossmember just a little bit. Putting it in straight up out of the box gives you about a 2 inch drop in the front. I'm sure 99% of people who build a truck like this are going to want that 2 inch drop, and probably want a little bit more than 2 inch, but I am that weird 1%, and I think that like the stock ride height is cool. I think that this is going to set this thing apart. So I just did a little modification, and I shaved off 1 inch from these guys and added 1 inch on the bottom to raise the vehicle 1 inch overall. So I'll actually still get a drop about 1 inch. I might be able to monkey with that with my coilovers, but that is something you do not need to do. That's just me being crazy. Okay, let's get these burned in. All right, there is the final result. I got these things absolutely dialed in, hopefully, for the best I can measure. Actually, it was pretty easy. There's a lot of points on this chassis to measure from. It seems like this thing is actually pretty square. I'm impressed. For being 1955, I feel like it might be a little bit better built than my 60s and 70s cars, so that's good. Angles are good, positions are good, welds are pretty good. I'm just going to show you my best welds. But yeah, it was pretty easy to get penetration on this steel because this is a pretty thick, like maybe like an 8 gauge or something, not quite 3/4 inch, and this is 3/4 inch. So, you know, burn in a little bit more heat into this guy and then kind of like flow it into the frame. Good to have it done, and we're pretty close to getting this thing back onto its front wheels. All right, so there's one last thing I didn't finish last week when I did the Ford Explorer rear axle swap, and that was modifying my leaf spring plate. So the stock Explorer leaf spring plate absolutely does not fit for a spring over axle configuration. So I'm gonna have to cut off the shock mount and cut the plate a little bit to clear the frame, I think. Probably have to weld some strength back into it. I'll figure it out. All right, here's the finished product. I got this thing cut down and bent it back in to kind of give this symmetrical look. And this thing's looking almost factory. Pretty proud of that. And what's important is that it does clear the frame. Yeah. You can't really tell, it's a little dark in there, whatever, but it works. Go ahead and hit this with some paint and then this thing will be done.